Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, and it's great to be with you today, to be your host and sensei, and got a great show in store for you today, especially those who love the early church fathers, and because we're going to be talking about a very important council in the church that I think many Catholics aren't aware of. You may be certainly aware of the Nicene Council, Nicene Creed. We're aware of the Council of Trent, perhaps. But what about the Council of Chalcedon, which is actually a very important council, and also a council that was surrounding, was very contentious. And what about this council, and what was the aftermath of this council? How does it affect Catholic and Orthodox relations? What happened afterwards? So we're going to have our good friend Erick Ybarra coming on after the other side of the break. We're going to talk about this Council of Chalcedon and its aftermath, something I think everybody should know. But before we continue, I should also remind everybody, if you haven't done it, mark this down on your calendars, get your pen. On June 13th, we're going to have a men's conference here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. We're going to have Jesse Romero, Ruben Nava, and also Tim Gordon. It's going to be available online streaming, so check it out. Also, mark June 20th, by the way, because June 20th we're going to have a virtual pilgrimage that's going to be led by our good friend Stephen Ray. So it's going to be good times. And Richard, I hear a live mic in the studio. I guess Richard can't hear me. Hopefully you guys aren't hearing it. Anyway, so mark those down. June 13th, men's conference. June 20th, men's. We're going to have Steve Ray's virtual pilgrimage. It's going to be lots of fun. And, it's great because you can attend these great events put on by Virgin Most Powerful Radio. That you don't have to leave the comfort of your own home. You can just check it out by yourself. So go to our flagship website, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org, and you can get all the information, how to register, and so on. So very good. All right, so let's see. We have a Finding a Fallacy today, as you know, every episode on Virgin Most Powerful Radio, on Hands-On Apologetics. We have a Finding the Fallacy. Today's Finding the Fallacy is called Chronological Snobbery. And also, we meet an early church father, whose early church father today is St. Hilary of Poiter. So good stuff in store for us. Great show, so thank you all for coming. In fact, let me give my shout-outs, my hat tip, my hellos to all of you watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. Turn my attention here to the social media section of the dojo. Thank you for the emojis. Appreciate it. Yes, the dojo lights are on, Beth, and we're ready to roll. Also, I want to welcome all of you listening on radio around the country and via podcast around the world. So, and again, you could download podcast of not only Hands-On Apologetics, all the other great shows produced by Virgin Most Powerful at the flagship website, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org. And also, let's see, if you have any questions for Erick Ybarra, give us a call toll-free at 888-526-2151. That is 888-526-2151. Or you can always email us if you ever have a question, or maybe you just want to share what's going on in your life. You can email us at questions@handsonapologetics.com. That's the official dojo mailbox. And, I do answer the emails. Not very promptly always, but yes, I do answer the emails. So I think we got all the warm-up sessions done. Why don't we start our workout? We'll jump right into the Finding the Fallacy for today, which is chronological snobbery. Actually, I mentioned this a little earlier this week because there is another fallacy that's kind of similar. And basically, chronological snobbery is when an argument that the thinking, art, or science of an earlier period is inherently inferior to that of the present, simply by the virtue of its temporal priority or the belief that since civilization has advanced in certain areas, people from earlier periods were less intelligent. So basically, this is one of those fallacies where you look down your nose at all your predecessors, and only the new, the most modern stuff is considered superior. Chronological snobbery happens an awful lot. It's really part of this conflict myth that started in the 1800s. That there's this conflict between the church and science. And in this conflict myth, the idea is that the church is for the past, and everything that was before is old, obsolete, broken down, but science and all the new stuff is great. And so we kind of inherited this worldview, and it's actually, I think it's been reinforced by technology. I mean, after all, you always expect version 2.0 to be better than version 1.0 and 3.0 to be better than 2.0, although it doesn't always work that way. And so we're just imbibed this in our culture that whatever is newest is the best, and therefore things of the past are looked down upon. And when that occurs, ladies and gentlemen, that's called chronological snobbery. If that's the only reason you have to criticize thoughts of the past is that because they were old, that is a problem. And if, by the way, if you run into somebody who is snobbish, chronologically speaking, call them out on it. Just say, why do you think that the age in which an idea or a proposition is proposed, that somehow it is necessarily inferior to something more modern or up to date? I always use mathematics. What does it really matter if somebody in the 3rd century proposed that 1 + 1 = 2? It still is true, even when somebody proposes the same thing in modern math books, right? Age doesn't affect truth. There's no freshness date when it comes to truth. All right, so that's our Finding the Fallacy for today, chronological snobbery. Let's jump into the Meet the Early Church Father. Today's early church father, Hilary of Poiter, and who was born sometime around 315, died around 368. St. Hilary is known as the Athanasius of the West, so-called because of his staunch support for the Nicene doctrine against the Arians. He was born in a wealthy pagan family in Poitiers, and he received a very excellent education in philosophy and rhetoric. And after making a study of the Old and New Testament scriptures, he was converted to the faith. And although he was married, the clergy and laity of his native city elected him as their bishop in 350 A.D. In 356 A.D., Hilary was exiled by Constantius to Phrygia in Asia Minor because he had been organizing resistance against the Metropolitan of Gaul. By the way, Gaul is just an older name for France. Saturnius of Arles, who had Arian tendencies. But he made so much mischief for the Arians in Asia Minor that they basically sent them packing back to France, back to his own see in 359 AD, where he promptly obtained the excommunication of St. Saturninus. So that Arianism in the West crumbled so quickly after the death of Constantius, who died in 361. It's largely due to the long-standing and strenuous efforts of Hilary. Hilary died in 367 or 368 AD and was proclaimed a doctor of the church by Pius IX in 1851. And we should probably mention a couple of his writings that are very important that are still extant today. For example, we have Hilary's commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, which was written around 353, 355. Very important. It is an authentic work mentioned by other church fathers. In fact, Jerome knew of this work and considered it a genuine and authentic work of Hilary. Another very important work that he wrote is on the Trinity. Jerome also refers to this work, although he has a different title. Rather than On the Trinity, he titles it Against the Arians. John Cassian also knew it. He had another title called Of the Faith, De Fide, but it's correctly titled De Trinitate, concerning the Trinity. It is recognized in the early 6th century as Hilary's masterpiece, and you can still read it today, by the way. If you go to sites like newadvent.org, click on the Fathers, scroll down to Hilary, you can read this remarkable treatise. Another thing he's known for is his encyclical letter on the councils, written about 358. It was written while he was in exile in Phrygia, and by this time, Arianism had descended into a really, really radical kind of Arianism, where, remember, the Arians believed that the Son was created, and so he was like the Father, but not of the same substance as the Father. Well, Arianism devolves into this idea that the Son is wholly unlike the Father. And Hilary exploits that in this encyclical letter and tries to bring about a unity between those who hold the Orthodox Nicene faith and those who hold to semi-Arianism. And that is our early church father for today, Hilary of Poitiers. Coming up on the other side of the break, our good friend Erick Ybarra is coming on. We're going to be talking about Chalcedon and its aftermath. Stay tuned, folks.
Psalm 119 says, "Your word is a lamp for my feet and a light to my path." According to St. John Paul II, being a Christian means saying yes to Jesus Christ. It consists in surrendering to the Word of God and relying on it, but also endeavoring to know better and better the profound meaning of this Word. May God grant that we always rely on His Word, read it often, and put it into practice.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy?
Or will it be a girl? We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president?
Or maybe a doctor. Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Marianne Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, to Hands on Apologetics. We're going to talk about a very fiery and controversial council. That is the Council of Chalcedon, and what it meant to clear up and what was its aftermath. And I can think of no better person to discuss this with than our good friend Erick Ybarra. Erick, as you know, has done a tremendous amount of work, especially in the area of papacy and early church fathers. He has an incredible blog that you can check out all his great work at erickybarra.org. And you may also know him as the co-host at reasonandtheology.com. And Erick, welcome back to Hands on Apologetics.
Oh, thank you for inviting me on again, Dr. Gary. It's really great. Appreciate it.
Yeah. It's whenever it comes to intricate controversies in the early church, I always go to you because you have done your homework, and it's so enlightening too because you're so even-handed. You look at things from different perspectives, and so tell us a little bit about what led up to. Actually, here's a better question to start off with: is this pronounced Chalcedon or Chalcedon? I've heard it both ways.
Yeah, and I've heard it both ways, and I think the more proper way of saying it in English is Chalcedon. It's kind of like with a K sounding at the beginning. I've also heard some people who are closer to the linguistic knowledge of the original that will say Chalcedon. But okay. I think the better way to say it in English is Chalcedon.
Okay. Well, we'll try to stick to that. I can't guarantee I'm not going to slip up. But so what was what led to this council?
Yeah, so this is a major turning point in the early church. Again, by then, we're talking the 430 to 450 range, which is already 400 years after the founding of the church. And it all centers on the identity of Jesus Christ and how his union is understood. The fathers at Nicaea taught that Christ was homoousion with the Father, which means that the Son of God and the Father are of one substance, equal in nature, equal and the same in essence, power, will, and et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so everybody is on the same page by 430 with the Council of Nicaea. No more disputing that. I mean, you do have Arians, and certainly the Western barbarians somehow picked it up and brought it more towards the West later years. But at this time, when we're talking about Rome and the Eastern Patriarchs, everybody is in agreement that the Council of Nicaea is an irremovable monument for the church. However, there's another layer underneath the homoousios doctrine, and that is, how do we understand Christ? Is he one subject? Is he two subjects together that are cooperating with each other? Or is he really just one subject? If he's one subject, how do you have a singularity from a prior duality of divinity and humanity? Because we can understand us as one subject. I'm Erick Ybarra, I'm a human, one subject. But we worship the Word made flesh. And you don't worship a man. So this duality then caused certain theologians to think that there are two subjects in Christ. And that's where you get Nestorius' teaching, which comes prior to him from Theodore of Mopsuestia. And they're trying to be fair and balanced, but they ended up falling into the ditch of saying that there are two in Christ in terms of the hypostasis, the concrete subject. that exists is two.
Mhm.
And that ran against the orthodoxy that was understood in Alexandria, which tended more towards, the single subject Christology, St. Cyril of Alexandria. And so in 430, you had the Council of Ephesus, which pretty much condemned Nestorius and the idea that there's a two-subject Christology where Mary is the mother of one of the subjects, and the other subject, being God, is eternal, can't have a mother. And they nailed down, no, there's one subject who has there's two natures in one hypostasis, one person. And since Mary is the mother of that one person, she is legitimately the mother of God. Fast forward 20 years, and you have an archimandrite in Constantinople who's condemned. We talked about this last time, Eutychius, and he was so afraid of Nestorianism that he went to the other ditch, where the single subject Christology swallowed up the duality of natures. So now he admitted that you had God before the union in the womb of Mary. You had divinity and humanity coming together. So he admitted that there was a duality. But after the union, the humanity gets kind of swallowed up. And so now it's not just a human, it's not just God, because the Word took on flesh. But you have this idea of like a one nature, one divine human nature kind of composite. And that was real difficult to register with some of the other facts that the Orthodox bishops knew, namely that certain things that Jesus did cannot be attributed to anything but humanity. So when he fell asleep, when he got hungry, when he got hurt, when he was thirsty, these are not things that can happen to a divine nature.
Right.
So the human nature has to produre, it has to persist after the union. In the same way, a human being can't walk on water, a human being can't raise the dead, and a human being can't foretell his death, his resurrection, and his ascension. So these things are from the divine nature. So you have to have the duality of natures continuing in the single subject, who is the person.
Right.
And so Eutychius was condemned. The Council of Chalcedon was held, but you had the language barrier, the concept barrier, the distance, the failure of communication, and you have there was a hostility in terms of politics. Who runs the church? Who has the final say on matters? This, you could say, Chalcedon is kind of like a battleground where you see certain test subjects are on the field as to what's the final say in the church. Is it the council? Is it the emperor? Is it the pope? Is it the consensus? If there's more than one consensus, which consensus? So you had a big problem in the See of Alexandria. And you had a big problem in the See of Jerusalem. The church in Palestine, they were very much against what Pope Leo the Great had written about this subject, because Pope Leo wrote a famous tome, and that was a document sent to the Council of Chalcedon, and it was expected that would be the nail in the coffin, end of discussion. Well, not everybody thought that. You certainly had bishops from Palestine, Illyricum, peninsula in the middle of the east and west there. You had bishops from Egypt, obviously, that were contesting Leo's tome. They thought it was basically a Nestorian document. And so it was kind of put into a contest. The overwhelming majority of the bishops understood that Pope Leo was Orthodox, his teaching was Orthodox. but you had a resistance movement, and this resistance movement put all of its stock in the fact that Rome and the Council of Chalcedon were nullifying the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Ephesus. So they saw Rome, the Council of Chalcedon, the new Emperor Marcion. They saw these certain bishops in Egypt, Palestine, Syria. They all saw them as basically going into apostasy over the issue of Christ.
Now, these bishops, were they Eutychian? And so since he didn't endorse Eutyches, then you must be a Nestorian? Was that kind of their approach, or was it more, political?
No, they were.
Oh, no, I think we're having problems with the connection. I see you, but I don't hear you. So, Richard, as we try to get him back on the line, either that or maybe that was just such a profound question that it blew out the Skype connection. I sincerely doubt it, though. But anyway, okay, so it's on his side. So we're going to wait for him to get in contact with us. So just to clarify, Chalcedon's this giant lightning rod in the ancient world, because you have Nicaea, which proclaims that Jesus is consubstantial with the Father in terms of his divine nature. And then you have, how do we understand the human nature and its relationship to the divine? And as Erick pointed out, you have Nestorian, who believed, if you have two natures, you basically need a person for each nature. So there's a kind of a divine person and a human person, so to speak. Or he uses a much better word, subject, for each one. So there's not just one Jesus. There are Jesuses, the God Jesus and the human Jesus. And so that's why they had trouble with the term Mary is mother of God, because they would say, no, she's the mother of the human Jesus, the human nature only. And so, like you mentioned, the councils met, they condemned Nestorius, but this often happens throughout church history, is whenever an error shows up and it's combated, sometimes people go to the opposite extreme and they end up being heretics themselves, and that's what happens with Eutyches. And so Chalcedon had its work cut out for it because it had to walk this tightrope. But anyway, coming back, God willing, we're going to have Erick Ybarra back with us and talk more about Chalcedon and its aftermath. Stay tuned, folks.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR, live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin's Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center or Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And when you log in your Amazon account and you purchase products, a portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And it doesn't cost you a dime. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. We are chatting with our good friend, Master Apologist Erick Ybarra, about the Council of Chalcedon and its aftermath. And, right when we left, Erick, I was kind of setting up how often when heresy comes up in the early church, people who want to combat it often fall into the opposite extreme. And my question I posed to you before we got cut off was, the people who opposed Leo's tome, was it because they were Eutychians and anything that didn't sound Eutychian was automatically like the opposite extreme? Or was it much more subtle?
Yeah, it was more subtle than that because they were all on board with Eutychius' condemnation.
Okay.
So Eutychius' doctrine, they did not accept that. However, they still thought that the Roman tome from Leo and the decrees at the Council of Chalcedon were blurring too much of what needs to be confessed. Namely, that there's one incarnate nature in the divine in Christ Jesus, which is a line that comes straight out of Saint Cyril of Alexandria, and because Saint Cyril said one single divine incarnate nature, it of the Word made flesh, it complicated matters because Cyril of Alexandria was kind of put on a pedestal at the Council of 431 in Ephesus, and the formula of reunion in 433 with John of Antioch. Saint Cyril's letters against, he had a number of letters that were put up and held as the standard for orthodoxy, and the Tome of Leo, they understood it to be still not strong enough in confessing a singular divine incarnate nature of the Word. And so they still, they anathematized Eutychius, but you had, for example, the Patriarch of Alexandria, Dioscorus. He was condemned by the Council of Chalcedon, and a replacement was put in place in Egypt there. His name was Prosterius. And he was the lawful successor of Dioscorus, who held to the Council of Chalcedon. However, those who rejected Chalcedon in Alexandria, the record has it that they murdered him, and they went ahead and put a certain Timothy. I can't pronounce this all that perfectly, but in the English it sounds like Aurelius, which I think is a surname. He could be surnamed Timothy the Cat, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And he rejected the Council of Chalcedon, so he was the new hero, sort of leading the way against Chalcedon, against Rome, and against the emperor, who at the time was Leo, but then Marcion, and then Leo succeeded Marcion. So now you had an Emperor Leo and a Pope Leo, two Leos. And in Palestine, when Juvenal of Jerusalem, who was the patriarch, when he made it back home, there was riots. They wouldn't even let him back into the cathedral church because he accepted the Council of Chalcedon. Then you had dissidents in Syria as well. And so they're all upholding the flag of St. Cyril of Alexandria, the Council of 431. Pope Celestine, Cyril, 431. And they're thinking that Rome and the emperor, the new imperial power, and the See of Antioch and the See of Constantinople, especially, are basically apostatizing. And so you have a real big division in Christendom at this time, and it's so much so that there was now a question as to the status of the Council of Chalcedon. If you could look at this from the emperor's point of view, he's defending the Roman Empire. He can't have internal division like this. He needs ecclesial unity, especially military unity, and so Emperor Leo ends up asking, what is the status of Chalcedon? Is it really that irreformable? Can we have another council? And Pope Leo the Great was adamant that once a council is confirmed by the consensus of the bishops, and then when it has the confirmation of the Apostolic See, nobody can unearth and revise it. But this becomes real difficult because the emperors are running the show in the East, and they can't get compliance. So you had Emperor Zeno. That we're fast forwarding a bit here. Emperor Zeno rises to the throne of the empire, and he ends up getting put down by a usurper. That usurper's name was Basiliscus, and Basiliscus basically elevated Timothy the Cat in Alexandria. So now you had an emperor and the Patriarch of Alexandria, the bishops in Syria, and certain bishops in Palestine now garnering more support against Chalcedon, and then eventually Antioch joins them. The good news is when Emperor Zeno came back and reclaimed the throne that was seized from him, Basiliscus is put down. Emperor Zeno comes into power again, and he comes out with something called the Henoticon, or the reconciliation document. It's a document to try and pacify the non-Chalcedonians and the Chalcedonians. And the document was okay. It listed out a Christology that seemed to try and be a rapprochement between those who were rejecting Chalcedon and those who accepted it. However, at the end of it, it said, whoever teaches otherwise, either at any other church or at Chalcedon, let him be anathema. So Rome took this as a slap in the face, because even though it may not have contained heresy, it took the trophy of Chalcedon off the shelf, in a sense.
Right.
Of course, in Constantinople, eventually you had the Bishop Acacius, who he succeeds Anatolius and another, and he goes along with this Henoticon. So now you have the Eastern Emperor and the Eastern Patriarchs pretty much all in agreement with this Henoticon document. Now, you had some in the East that wouldn't even tolerate that. But the idea was they were trying to move in stages to bring everyone back together again. But again, this is a battleground where Rome gets to test its authority against the East. And so you had popes that were not willing to budge one bit on Chalcedon. And this comes out quite a bit, especially under Pope Felix II. He succeeds Pope Simplicius, who also said Chalcedon can't come off the shelf. And eventually you have was a 30-year schism between Rome and the East that happened again between 484 and 519. So you had a union between Rome and Constantinople between 451 all the way to 484, and then you have what now a schism where the East is really throwing Chalcedon into a question mark. Some people accept it, some people reject it. They offer this Henoticon document to try and reconcile everyone. Some of them hold it while they hold to Chalcedon. Some of them hold it while rejecting Chalcedon. And Rome just said, this is not tolerable. So Rome made the big move in Pope Felix II with deposing and excommunicating Cassius of Constantinople. And that's what launched this big schism, because the emperors now were siding with the Easterners. And Rome was pretty much alone in upholding Chalcedon as the final word on Christology. And so you had quite a bit of a division here, and there was really no hope in sight unless you basically had what's it called in chess? You had a stalemate, exactly, because Rome wasn't going to. Rome continued to make the claim that Christ gave a constitutional order to the church, namely, the keys are given to St. Peter, and whatever he binds on earth is bound in heaven, and whatever he looses on earth is loosed in heaven. That's the repeated affirmation of the popes. In the East, their mentality was that the truth is what matters. And so it doesn't matter who goes against it. Even if it's the Pope, we're going to reject it. Now, you had a lot of Easterners who did not go along with the program in the East, and they were writing appeals to Rome. So we are fortunate enough to have certain appeals written from usually the underclergy, basically saying, asking for help, an authoritative decree from the Pope to deal with the new set of circumstances. And Rome kind of took a very simple approach. Either they signed the dotted line on Chalcedon and Leo's tome, or they're going to be forever estranged from the See of Peter. And if they're estranged from the See of Peter, then they're estranged from the Church of Christ.
Yeah,
and that's kind of the position that Rome took.
Yeah, well, we're coming up on the break, and let me leave you with this question. We'll see if we can answer it on the other side of the break. It seems that if the Pope hadn't stepped in and insisted on Chalcedon being authentic, then that would undermine the authority of all councils, at least to my thinking. But I'll let you answer that on the other side of the break. We're chatting with Erick Ybarra about the Council of Chalcedon and its aftermath. Stay tuned, folks. More to come on the other side of the break.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tyr and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you.
Healthcare popular news today seems to be coming from everywhere and everyone. It's confusing at least and untrustworthy at the worst. Dr. Aceta is a faithful Catholic in the Kern County community. He is trustworthy, well-researched, and will only give expert opinion on matters in his own specialty. Catholic teaching at its entirety is of utmost importance to Dr. Aceta. Give Dr. Aceta a call for your obstetrics and gynecological needs at 661-695-6617.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Hands-on Apologetics. And, just a quick reminder, put this on your calendars, folks, because we have a couple of very special events coming up on Virgin Most Powerful Radio. June 13th, we're going to have a men's conference live stream with Jesse Romero, Ruben Nava, and also Tim Gordon. And on June 20th, our good friend Steve Ray is going to lead us on a virtual pilgrimage, and you don't want to miss that. You can get all the information at virginmostpowerfulradio.org, our flagship website. And Eric, okay, so I left you with the question on the other side of the break. Basically, although it seems like it's the papacy versus the East, to my mind it sounds like if the Pope backed down, would any council, even an ecumenical council, be definitive?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of scholars have asked this question, and of course, you get different answers. But in my opinion, I think that the only reason that Chalcedon made it out of the last part of the 5th century is because of the insistence of Rome on its decrees, and not just its decrees, but its singular status as an affirmative statement on Christology. And but you had that stalemate, of course.
Yeah.
And so, when people read, for example, Satis Cognitum by Pope Leo the 13th, where he says that it's been the constant pattern and tradition of the Church that the Apostolic See of Rome, the See of Peter, was the supreme arbiter in doctrine. Obviously, some of that, I think, it doesn't mean absolutely unanimous, because you had certain contests. Of course, all the popes have known that you had contests. Arius contested Nicaea. You had the Nestorians contest Ephesus 431. So certainly, having people protesting doesn't nullify real authority. But nonetheless, you had these churchmen who were in a stalemate. And this is where providence comes in, because if it wasn't for the new Emperor Justin, who succeeded Anastasius was a Roman emperor who looked at this situation and said, it has got to change. But when he asked Rome, he sent a fresh delegation to Rome and basically asked, can you send people over to the East with your terms of reconciliation? Well, those terms were, very frosty, to say the least. Basically, sign the dotted line and you'll be in communion with the real church again. And Anastasius just completely sent them back to Rome. And so he saw that as an offensive, But Anastasius was succeeded by Justin, who was a Latin-speaking man from the Illyricum Peninsula. So he had a little bit of more of a Western understanding, you could say. But as he comes into power, he basically is ready for Rome to have its way. And so Emperor Justin, with his nephew Justinian, who would eventually become the famous Great Justinian, they both consult Rome once again afresh, and under the pontificate of Pope Hormisdas. And this is around 515, 516. So we're already decades into this unfortunate division. And of course, Pope Hormisdas drew up what's called the Libellus Hormisdae, or the Libellus of Hormisda. In English, people say the formula of Hormisdas, which was basically a long statement of faith, um, which it pronounced the sacred rights of the Apostolic See based on the divine promise from Christ to Peter. And then it listed the councils that are ecumenical, including Chalcedon, and it capitalized on Leo's letters, including the tome. And it basically said, if you want to be in communion with the true church, with Christ, and with the saints, you will agree to Leo's tome, Chalcedon, and you will join with the Roman See. Well, Constantinople signed it. The Patriarch John II, he signed it. All of his archimandrites in Constantinople signed it. You had many bishops signing it in Constantinople and in other areas. And this brought healing to the schism. Initially in 519 is when this happened. There was an official reconciliation between Rome and Constantinople. And in particular, one of the things that the Pope demanded was the removal of certain names from the diptychs in divine liturgy. If your listeners will recall, in the ancient world, late antiquity, and for many centuries forward, you had the altar, and then you had kind of like a wax board that had, on one side, had a list of names of deceased bishops, and on the other side, it had the name of living bishops. And if your name was on there, that means that altar was in union with the church. If they took that name off, then it symbolized that they were out of union with that bishop. Well, Rome required all those bishops who were putting Chalcedon into the ringer to come off the diptychs. And so many bishops were willing to do this in the East, but you had some that just were not, because they didn't think that the bishops that had passed away were really culpable for what the emperors were doing and what the patriarchs were doing, and they were innocent collateral damage. And so they wrote back to Rome saying, can you modify the terms a little bit on these names? At first, Rome was hesitant, but eventually Rome gave way, but absolutely required the name of Acacius, who was the first bishop to really sign the Henoticon in Constantinople. And so that one of the peace of the two churches, East and West, in 519. Of course, you still had Easterners who saw this as betrayal. So there's a famous book out there, Justinian and the Making of the Syrian Orthodox Church. It details everything I'm saying here. This was basically the major parting of the ways in the East. So you had two camps in the East: those who went back into union with Rome, and then those who went their own way. And those are the Coptic Orthodox, the Syrian Orthodox, and the Armenian Orthodox. And then there's also obviously a segment in Egypt, the Ethiopian and the Indian Coptics. So they rejected the Chalcedon, they rejected Leo, they rejected the formula of Hormisdas, and they basically saw most of the East going into apostasy with Rome. And so it was really that era was a contest of what side you're going to go with, and what's interesting is a lot of the Coptic Orthodox, they have, when they dialogue with the Chalcedonian Orthodox, the Byzantine Greek, the Greco-Russian Byzantines, they can always say, hey, you left us in 519 under papal authority, but then you rejected papal authority in the 11th century, you know. So they see themselves as more clean from, they clean themselves off of the papacy by several centuries before that's how they see it, of course, you know. But there's been a lot of good dialogue with the Coptic Ecumenical Commission over there in Alexandria. There's been a lot of agreed statements between Vatican officials and officials of the Coptic Syrian Orthodox, and I think the Christological differences have now been healed completely. Though there's many agreed on statements about this. However, other developments in the West stand in the way. Obviously, they don't accept the papacy per se. They do accept primacy. The Coptic Orthodox, especially, they call their bishop in Alexandria the Pope. You know, obviously it was more common in earlier years, but it's become a much more endeared title. He's the patriarch of all of Egypt, basically. And then you've got the Syrian primate, and so they've made some steps towards reunion with us. They've made some steps with the Chalcedonian Orthodox as well, who are separated from us. And so it's just interesting to see how these Christological doctrines over the years were healed with the accompaniment of better technology, better communication, better understanding of term and concept. Back then, I don't want to say that they were more brutal. I don't want to say that. But I do want to say that they didn't have as much patience for that. If what you said sounded different, they were ready to break communion with you. But today, I think we're more sensitive, for better or worse. We're more sensitive, and I think in this case for the better, because there were some unnecessary divisions in terms of the theology. Of course, we uphold Saint Cyril of Alexandria. We think he's a saint. We think what he wrote was excellent, but we just think that there's different layers to the Christology, and when you make proper distinctions and when you see what both sides are really trying to say, I think that we've made almost a full agreement on our Christological differences. So that Acacian schism it was healed, and unfortunately, when the Acacian schism was healed, the schism in Egypt with the Copts and the Syrians kind of solidified, unfortunately.
Yeah, very good. Well, Erick, man, what a great presentation. Very complex material, but it's beautiful how you could simplify it, make it so understandable. Let's talk a little bit about some of your projects, before you go. Tell us a little bit about what's cooking on Reason and Theology and erickybarra.org.
Yeah, so Reason and Theology, we just had a guy on, Kennedy Hall, Catholic Masculinity. Check it out. It was an excellent video we did last night. And we've got a lot of good material coming out on the energy essence distinction and other issues related to East and West.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
All right, Erick Ybarra, ladies and gentlemen. Check out his stuff, erickybarra.org. And coming up next, we have High Impact Catholic Talk coming at you with the Terry and Jesse Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. And God willing, we'll be back again tomorrow to do this thing we call Hands on Apologetics. Bye-bye, everybody.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.